Coming up, welcome to Frontiers, our very first program. Join us for a celebration of Frontiers, 3 years on the air.
You could be out here forever. There's no sense of time.
A look back at some of the stories we've brought to you and a look at the work of a nationally known Native American journalist.
This is going to be essential for other people.
Some of the parallels between Alaska Natives and the indigenous people of Dominica.
From the Caribbean to the Arctic, the lives of Native people are changing in a dramatic fashion.
Ahead, a preview of Mark Trahant's new TV show, a new voice for Indian country in more ways than one.
Alaska, where there are old triumphs, but also new frontiers, with challenges as great as the state itself, but a belief that the best is yet to come. Bringing you the faces, the places, and the spirit of the last frontier. This is Frontiers with Rhonda McBride.
Welcome to our 3rd anniversary edition of Frontiers. Since we began our journey in May of 2015, we've logged thousands and thousands of miles across Alaska. And one of those trips took us to Utqiagvik, also known as Barrow, where we met Heidi Ahsoak, a woman who married into a North Slope family and fell in love with the Inupiat language and culture. Just a few miles outside of town, you feel like you've experienced infinity. But the Ahsoak family knows exactly where they're going. Heidi and Jonas and their son Mark are here to check their nets for whitefish.
I should have brought the shovel.
The net is strung between 2 holes in the ice, which had frozen overnight.
We've got nanoks, which are polar bears.
Along the bluffs nearby, there are also fox dens.
They'll come up to you as well.
Life here at the top of the world forces you to be prepared.
I had caught a polar bear and we sent them out to get tanned, and Heidi had sewn them up for me, and they're really warm. It was one of the first polar bear I caught.
Heidi sews polar bear pants and parkas. Not bad for someone who was born in New York of Irish and German descent.
Not the best day.
Heidi Ahsoak has not only adapted to life here, but embraced the culture.
This one shows a person with a dog sled team.
Heidi Ahsoak manages the Utqiagvik bilingual preschool.
This is a whaling scene. Umeak with the people, the crew members.
Everything here is designed to bring the Inupiat culture home. The building blocks of success.
This is a caribou and this is a moose. So tuttu, tutuvak.
Heidi hopes someday to be a fluent speaker of Inupiat, just like her lead teacher, Naomi Ahsoak.
A lot of the elders around the community have been voicing, we need young teachers, and I was like, okay, I'm stepping up.
Until then, she plays a supporting role for the staff. Naomi is a student at the Ilisavik College, where she works on a degree in early childhood development. There's even one high school intern.
Angon, Kayok Tuk Tuk. What's he doing?
He's paddling the boat.
He's paddling a boat.
To teach Inupiat, Jimmy Tuckfield has had to learn more about his language, which he loves to share.
When I was clocking out, one of the kids said, "I love you, teacher." And that made me like super happy. And then I heard another student, and then another. And that like just made my day.
What's my favorite word?
Heidi's love affair with Inupiat began with a single word.
Kupuk. Fancy trim on jacket.
An elder gave her the name.
And he goes, "You're always kupuking. You're such a seamstress." And that meant a lot to me, that he recognized what I do. So kupuk to me is so much more than a word or a name. It's in my heart.
This is the preschool's cleanup song, one that children have begun to sing at home. A reminder that children are teachers too, something Heidi learned when her daughter was a student here.
She came home and said, "Imuksamik." And I, "What? Imuksamik?" "I don't know what you're saying." "Imuksamik." And so I called my mother-in-law. "You got to listen to what she's saying. I don't know what she's saying."
Her daughter was asking for milk, and at that point, Heidi realized she could help pass on the language to the next generation.
I know that anybody can learn when they set their heart to it. It takes a lot of practice.
As an aka, or grandmother, Eunice Ahsoak is a natural teacher.
I'm going out.
Eunice believes her granddaughter, Tatiana, has the potential to become fluent.
She knows words. If she could make sentences and learn how to speak, that would be so good.
The sounds of the language are second nature to her. So how does Tatiana feel when she speaks Inupiat?
Happy.
The lesson for the Ahsoaks, it's always worth it to try. Like words.
Getting some really big ones lately.
The number of fish add up over time.
Some people still do that at their home, still talking Inupiat, and that's really awesome.
Jonas is not fluent, but he tries.
Whenever he wants me to get something, he always says it in Inupiat.
Because look, you could see the bottom.
Mark looks for fish underneath the ice.
It's like a blue color down there, huh?
The world is still a place of wonder.
You could be out here forever. There's no sense of time.
The hope, the language of the land, will always be here too.
Coming up, one of the stories we brought you in October 2016.
It's kind of a miracle that we got a settlement.
The birth of the Alaska Federation of Natives, as our birthday look back continues.
I'd like to wish you guys a happy 3rd birthday. Many, many more.
As we say in Yupik, anutit.
You guys do a great job. It's always awesome and very interesting, and we wish you more birthdays.
Anutik Tikiti. Happy birthday, Frontiers.
The name Frontiers means many things to many people. For some, the divide between the old and the new. For first Alaskans, the loss of identity that took place when newcomers overwhelmed their traditional cultures. And yet, that frontier has begun to be reclaimed. The formation of the Alaska Federation of Natives was one of the first steps. Here's a look back at our story on the 50th anniversary of AFN in October of 2016.
Native corporations and their impressive office buildings, they loom large in the state's economic landscape. Yet most Alaskans have no idea how these corporations came to be, how they owe their existence to AFN's grassroots fight for land. At the museum, you can find a tribute to AFN's humble beginnings.
Oh my God, that is a copy of my paper.
A copy of a graduate research paper Willie Hensley wrote for Justice J. Rabinowitz. Hensley still has the original.
And it has the A that he gave me for the paper.
A paper that laid out AFN's legal case that Alaska Natives were entitled to land taken away at statehood.
These are like founding documents here.
You can also find Emil Nadi's report on AFN's first meeting. He was president.
Editorials opposed us, mining groups opposed us, individuals wrote letters against us.
People thought we were militants or radicals.
Maybe not radicals, but young guns ready to do what they felt needed to be done.
This was an actual crisis point. This is 7 years after statehood. The machine was in motion, that is the land selection machine.
Lands for thousands of years held in common by people who depended on food from the wild to survive.
We were never going to get that land back, ever. And so it was pretty darn clear to us that we had to stop the state selections.
Our first reaction, of course, was to basically state that we owned all of Alaska. We wanted it back. We wanted to be paid for the land that was already taken. Naturally, this was impossible.
But the forces of history worked in AFN's favor. In the backdrop of the land claims fight,
there were marches through the streets of towns and cities.
A national civil rights and anti-poverty movement, which gave Alaska Natives momentum. A sympathetic president, Richard Nixon, never forgot his college football coach, a Native American who helped him understand the injustices to his people. And then the push for the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. To build it, Oil companies wanted land claims settled. And probably one of the most important factors, a newfound unity.
We wrote letters across the state to people we didn't know, people whose names we just heard.
People brought together under the umbrella of AFN. Even then, as a young man, Emil Noddy recognized the potential.
And to think what's happened here, the friendships we've made and the people we've come to know from coming together, I think is one of the great happenings.
It's kind of a miracle that we got a settlement. We had no money and no organization.
And no communication system.
There are no phones to the villages.
Ladies and gentlemen of the AFN, this is the White House in Washington calling. I present the President of the United States.
The year 1971, President Richard Nixon addresses AFN in this recorded message.
I want you to be among the first to know that I have just signed the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. This is a milestone in Alaska's history and in the way our government deals with Native and Indian peoples.
The deal, 44 million acres of land and nearly $1 billion. The legacy of AFN, a story that's far from over.
Just ahead, we catch up with Mark Trahant, one of the best-known American Indian journalists in the nation. Well, he has a new TV show and a new job as well. Mark Trahant wears many hats. Recently, he's been named the new editor of Indian Country Today. He's also a former editorial page editor of the Seattle Post-Intelligencer. And for journalism students here in Alaska, he's a familiar name. He served as the Atwood Journalism Professor at UAA. Wow, a lot of things. I haven't even mentioned all the different things that you have done, but tell us a little bit about this new Indian Country job, because as we last heard, that paper had gone by the wayside and had folded.
Thank you, Rhonda. Absolutely. So in September, the owners of Indian Country Today, which was the Oneida Nation, decided that the challenging landscape of the media, which you certainly know about, was too great and that they were backing out and were looking for a new owner. The publication went dark, and in February, they gave the publication to the National Congress of American Indians. And they called and said, well, what should we do with this asset? And I thought, you know, this is an extraordinary opportunity, because one of the odd things is when the paper was dark, it had 500,000 unique visitors a month. And this was
looking for it
with no content. And I think, wow, what an opportunity to create something without a legacy. So you don't have to worry about who's on staff, what they've been doing, trying to protect their jobs while creating new ones. We can just create. And I think that's just such a great opportunity.
But it's a little problematic because the National Congress of American Indians is kind of a political group. So how do you distinguish yourself as independent?
Right. We have a very complicated structure. And we actually went through scenario planning to make sure that you respect the journalism integrity. And in every case, it was for a violation that came up with the answer, editor resigns.
Editor resigns.
It requires a lot of thought in advance. We're separate. We're going to have a separate incorporation, and basically the Congress will appoint me. And once they do that, all of the journalism stops there. It has to go through me.
So there's a wall then.
Right.
Why is it that publications like Indian Country Today are so important to Native Americans? And I know that Alaska Native tribes depend on that publication as well.
Because the mainstream media just hasn't recorded the stories that are so important in Indian country for the most part. I mean, occasionally people do, but on a regular basis, there's just not a regular voice. And I think Indian Country Today provides that. And I'll give you an example. So often stories say about Medicaid, write about it with the lens of the state, which is important and needs to be recorded. But Medicaid has become the most important program to the Indian health system, and that's not often recorded. So someone like Indian Country Today does that.
Gives that extra perspective, that micro focus. Well, one of the things in Alaska history, a lot of people who are older would remember the Tundra Times, the Howard Rock publication that helped birth AFN, the Alaska Federation of Natives. So I think these newspapers are more than just newspapers.
They're training grounds, they're vehicles for, in fact, the very first editor was a guy by the name of Elias Boudinot, and he described Cherokee Phoenix as a vehicle of Indian intelligence. And I think that's essentially what we're trying to do, as a vehicle of Indian intelligence and excellence, and to tell stories that nobody would, to inspire people, to let them know they have a place in the media landscape.
Well, I want to just mention something here, because you were our very first guest on our very first Frontier show. There you are. And I remember you just now told me a story that you spilled a cup of water on our brand new set.
I did indeed.
Oh, wow. But, you know, for us, it was important to have you as a guest on this first show, because we were embarking on a new program to be able to bring stories from rural Alaska to the statewide community at large. Now, it's been done in Alaska, but we wanted to do more of it, to talk about Native communities.
Well, and your role as a statewide voice is really important, because I was, as you know, just in Bethel and flipped it on it, and there you were. And you can't do that throughout the state. It's important to have that link.
Now, you wear so many hats, as I said earlier, but you have another one that we haven't even talked about, and that is you are hosting a new TV show that is going to be carried by the First Nations Experience Network. I have never heard of that, I must say. What is it?
Well, and this is one where that Alaska divide comes in. In much of the state, it's carried live. It's First Nations Experience, FNX, and it's one of the sub-channels of PBS. So
now what we're seeing here is footage from one of your upcoming shows where you went to the Caribbean, to Dominica. Now, what were you doing there?
So the last Indian territory in the Caribbean is the Kalinago territory, and these folks first met Columbus 500 plus years ago, and they're still there, and they were on the really tip of Hurricane Maria.
And you can see from that footage that they were absolutely demolished. Are they getting much help?
No, it's very slow in coming, and it was a very poor community to begin with, and the resources are still not following.
So it's sort of like they don't have the economic clout to get the help.
Yeah, it's a poor nation, and they're the poorest part of that poor nation, so yes.
Well, I watched some of your documentary for this show, and one of the things I was struck by were the similarities from the people of the Caribbean to Alaskans, even though their climates are different.
Well, and the threat of climate change and how it's going to impact those communities, exactly the parallels you can see almost every step. And one of the ones in this show that I just love is the idea that through all of this turmoil and all this change, people are still there and still living on subsistence, still looking for ways to live off the land and
How do they
to survive.
subsist?
Fishing, timber, coconut.
But they have a lot of the same issues, like language erosion, saving their culture.
Culture, trying to show, keep things alive, making sure their grandchildren know. In fact, one of the people we interviewed, I just love this, works with a cultural program, and she was taking pictures of over the years of how the program has evolved. When the hurricane hit, she took her charts and put them under her mattress to make sure they survived. Everything else could go, but she wanted that cultural history to survive.
Isn't that amazing that it's so precious? And I think, Alaska Natives feel the same way about preserving their language. Well, one of the things you talked about, maybe you could set up this clip that we have from your show, is the indigenous knowledge and how valuable that is.
Right. In so many places, the people want to build the cheapest, quickest housing and get people housed as quickly as possible. And a lot of the Kalinago elders said, traditional knowledge has been building structures that last through hurricanes for a long time. And indeed, they have a traditional village, and some of the traditional homes in the territory are built with these really steep roofs. And they take a lot of work to build. They have to use wood at a certain time of the year. But what happens is the hurricane winds just come up and they go right over it. and they don't capture it.
Sort of passive resistance.
Exactly, a flat roof that just takes it. And they were talking how their traditional knowledge could survive. As climate changed, they know there are going to be more hurricanes.
Well, let's take a look at this clip here so people can see what you're talking about.
The amazing thing to me in looking at this village for tourists is how little damage there is. This is amazing after a major hurricane.
I am surprised because I asked one of my friends after the storm, how was Barana? And he said, Barana is, it's okay, the structure didn't fall and it's only 1 or 2 little damage, and I'm just surprised because to face a category 5 and, you know, to see the structures well, good and okay, this is proof that, you know, that is the way, that is the way we should build our traditional houses.
Amazing.
It's interesting because the way they rank hurricanes, there's reason there's no category 6, is once you're at category 5, it's pretty much total destruction. And you can see from that clip that the traditional buildings were not totally destroyed. In fact, the damage was minor.
Well, we have that same story in Alaska. Buildings being built in rural Alaska, not suited for the climate.
Right, and this is the parallel here, and I actually mentioned this at AFN last year, is that the opportunity to start from scratch and say, how should we build a community? If we move, why not build a community the way it ought to be done? And look at the long term and using traditional knowledge.
And that would be an interesting thing to follow. Well, we're just about out of time, but what other stories did you do here?
The one that's really exciting, I think, is look at Native women running for office. I did this by starting at the Capitol steps and walking 10,700 steps. Since 1790, there have been that many people elected to Congress, and never in the history of the country a Native woman.
Wow, well, we'll have to watch for those stories and many others that you'll be doing. Thank you. Well, we want to leave you now with a song, Happy Birthday in Yupik, sung by Peter Twitchell, who hails from Bethel. We have so many people to thank as we pass this 3-year milestone. Station management for its support of Frontiers, all of our staffers who work behind the scenes, and of course, viewers like you who make it all worthwhile. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Ang Nikanutik Frontiers. Ang Nikanutik Frontiers. Ang Nikanutik Frontiers. Ang Nikanutik Frontiers. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Frontiers. Happy birthday to you. Ang Nikanutik Frontiers. Ang Nikanutik Frontiers. Ang Nikanutik Frontiers. Ang Nikanutik Frontiers. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Frontiers. Happy birthday to